Hello, welcome to the Year 3 and 4 grammar cheat sheet. Today we're going to be going through a few things which are taught in Year 3 and 4 for our grammar objectives, just to try and help you get your head around some of the different terms and what they all mean. So we're starting off today with word classes. So the main word classes that we look at will be nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, conjunctions, determiners, pronouns and prepositions. So these things are all things we're going to have a little look at to see what they all mean. So firstly, nouns. So a noun is a naming word. It is either a person, a place, an animal or a thing. So you've got lots of different examples there. So most things that you can see or touch is a noun, is what we would tell the children. So a noun can also be something like a feeling though, so a little bit more tricky to get your head around. So love or happiness, fear or anger are also nouns. Proper nouns are nouns which start with a capital letter. So things like names of places, people, days of the week, day and months of the year are all proper nouns which need a capital letter. This is something which we practice a lot to make sure that we get those capital letters in, because it's something that is easily forgotten when the children are doing their writing. Okay, pronouns. So a pronoun is used to replace a noun. So rather than repeating ourselves saying Jack did this and then he did that and then he did this, we would say he rather than Jack, Jack, Jack all the time, just to make sure that it's not repetitive and to make sure it's clear that we know who or what is being talked about or written about in the writing. So different examples are he, she, they, it, them, her, him, his, ours and I. Verbs. So verbs are action words such as dancing or to think or said. They can also show a state of being, so is, am, was or were. And every sentence needs to include a verb. So she ran to school, ran will be the verb there. They had will be a verb, a really good time talking to each other. So verbs are doing words generally, is what we tell the kids. So anything that you are doing, that is your verb. An adverb then describes a verb or an adjective. It tells us when, where, how often, and how much something is. So loudly, healthily, sometimes, or later. So we often talk about adverbs and we'll say things like that you need to look for the ly suffix. It's an easy way to help the kids to understand that a lot of ly words like quickly, carefully, excitedly, and loudly are all adverbs because they are describing how you are doing something. So if I said the boy ran quickly or he walked carefully, it shows you a little bit more about how they are moving. Adjectives. Adjectives describe a noun. They can be things like adorable, bright, brave, angry, big, or ancient. So as you can see, we can describe people using adjectives, objects, good feelings or bad feelings, size and time. So if I was describing an old building, I would say that it was an ancient building, but I can also describe any other noun using an adjective. Something we do need to work on with the kids is making sure they choose an adjective that is relevant. So making sure that you choose an adjective that actually matches what you're talking about. So you wouldn't describe a dark night with the word bright in it because it's not describing what you're actually talking about. So you also wouldn't use something like the big colossal because you don't want two words which are describing the same thing in the same sentence. So both of those describe size. So you would choose something like the big powerful or whatever colour it was to describe that rather than choosing two of the same adjective. Determiners. So determiners tell us whether something is known or unknown. So I put the spoon on a table. That team has some big players. So it gives me a little more specific about the noun that we're talking about. So it tells me which noun I'm referring to. Okay. Preposition. So prepositions are where or when something is in relation to something else. So it's usually followed by a noun. Now this can be a preposition in time or in place. So I could say that after dinner we will be doing a maths lesson. So it would tell me when. So after would be a preposition for when there for time. But it could also be a preposition for place to tell me where something was. So he looks inside of the box that was beside the door. So prepositions tell us when or where. So here are a few more prepositions which we use in school. Some of them are easier to use than others. And some again can be used to describe time and place. So it's just choosing the relevant one to make sure it describes whatever it is best. So basic sentence structures. So sentences must contain a subject, object and verb. So sentences must also start with a capital letter and end with either a full stop, an exclamation mark or a question mark. So an example of a simple sentence is she ran to the shop. So here, she is my subject. It's who is performing the verb. The verb is the action that she's doing, so she ran. And the shop is wherever she's going. It's what is receiving the action. So the shop is where she's going to. So it's a simple sentence because it's a complete thought. So it's a complete sentence on its own. So the boys went to the park is another example. So the boys, again, would be the subject. Went will be the verb. And park would be the object because that's where they're going. And then, again, we like pizza. So we is the subject, it's who. Like is the verb, it's a doing word, to like something. And the object is pizza, it's the thing that you are talking about. Okay, there are 4 main sentence types. So the first of those sentence types is a statement. So a statement tells us a fact, an opinion, or an idea. They end in a full stop. So there are 7 colours in a rainbow, or it could be something like you find lions in Africa. There are lots of different examples that you could have for that one, but it's a basic sentence which tells us a fact, an opinion, or an idea. And that just ends in a full stop. The next one is a command. So commands tell people what to do. So they contain an imperative verb, which we call a bossy verb. So it's the word which tells you what to do. And it can end in either a full stop or an exclamation mark, depending on what that sentence is. So stop what you're doing. Stop would be my bossy verb, because that's what you are being asked to do. And that one could use an exclamation mark because you might shout that. Put your coat on would be another example. So put would be your bossy verb there because you're telling someone to do something again. Questions. So questions are used to ask something and end in a question mark. So they can ask who, why, when, where, or what. So where are my keys? Again, they end in a question mark. Nice and straightforward one, that one. An exclamation. Now an exclamation is used to show that someone is surprised. So they begin with either what or how and end in an exclamation mark. So what a lovely day would be an exclamation sentence. Or you might say something like, how big is that building? And it's not asking a question. It's just commenting on the size of something or what something is. And it's a surprising thing that you've seen. Conjunctions. Now, conjunctions are used to connect clauses together. So a clause is a part of a sentence. There are 2 types of conjunctions which we learn about. So we use coordinating conjunctions. These are used in a compound sentence where we have 2 clauses which have the same importance. So each of these clauses can be a simple sentence on their own. So we join those 2 clauses using one of these conjunctions. So either for, and, nor, but, or, yet, or so. Let's have a little look at that. So the children went to the park. They didn't go to the zoo. That's an example of 2 different simple sentences. So they're 2 clauses that make sense on their own. So let's turn these two simple sentences into a compound sentence by adding in a coordinating conjunction. So the children went to the park, so they didn't go to the zoo. You could have also used but they didn't go to the zoo, which would also make sense because you're saying that because they've done that, they've not done the other thing. But that one, you've got 2 sentences that you could have a full stop in the middle, but equally it would work with a conjunction instead. You just need to make sure that the conjunction suits the sentence type. Okay, so the other type of conjunctions are subordinating conjunctions. These are a little bit trickier to use because they are using a complex sentence where there is a main clause, which could be a simple sentence on its own, but there is also a one or more subordinate clauses. So the subordinate clause, because it starts with the conjunction, doesn't make sense on its own. So if I had that out of the sentence, it wouldn't make sense because it needs to link to the main clause for it to make sense. So the main conjunctions we use from this type are if, since, as, when, although, while, after, before, until, and because. So, the children danced excitedly. So that would be my main clause. It would be a simple sentence on its own. But if we extend that with a subordinate clause and a conjunction, it can become the children danced excitedly until the music stopped. So if I took until the music stopped out of that sentence, it wouldn't make sense on its own because you don't know what happens until the music stops. So the main clause explains that and completes the sentence. So with a complex sentence, we can move the subordinate clause around, and if it's at the beginning, it needs to have a comma after it. So originally we've got the example with it at the end, but we can move that clause to the beginning, start with the conjunction. So until the music stopped, comma, the children danced excitedly. So it still means the same thing, but we've just moved it around, but we need to make sure that there's a comma between those two clauses then. So this is a skill that we will practice lots and lots over the next year, or if they're in year 4 as well, they'll do it again then. It's something that is quite tricky to get your head around, but using our conjunctions in our writing just helps to get a different range of sentences rather than just writing simple sentences all the time. Tenses. So it's important when writing to make sure that we're using the correct tense to show when something is happening. If we're writing about things that have already happened, we could use a simple past tense. So this is where we'd use things like they were talking, it was cold, I went to school, he played well in the match, we walked a long way. So here it's just simple. You've just changed your verb into a past tense verb. We could also, however, use present perfect tense, which also tells me about something that's happened already. So this is where you use the word have or has and a past tense verb. So I have been there before, or I have been to school. He has finished his work. So you've got your have or your has followed by your past tense verb. And quite often, a past tense verb would usually end in an ed suffix. So like finished and walked and played all end in ed. And it's making sure that the children do put ed and not just the d on the end, because it's something we do quite often make that little mistake. Expanded noun phrases. So an expanded noun phrase is made up of a noun and at least one adjective. If you use more than one adjective to describe the noun, we need to put a comma between the adjectives. Let's have a little look at an example. So lots of yummy cold ice cream. So you have a determiner to start us off to just tell us which thing we are talking about. Then we have our adjective. Now we generally use 2. So you could use any adjective there to describe what you're talking about, and then your noun, whatever the thing is that you are wanting to describe. So it sounds very technical, but it's actually just 2 adjectives before a noun, really. It's quite a nice, easy one to practice. Just make sure that between the 2 adjectives there must be a comma because you're listing 2 items. Adverbial phrases. So adverbial phrases change or add to a verb or a clause. So they add more information, or they might change the meaning of something. So they show when something is happening, so that would be an adverbial of time, where it's happening, which is place, or how something is happening, which is manner. So if we have a look, we've got a few examples here. So a place would be on the ground or beside the window. So it's telling me, it uses a preposition to tell me where, so the preposition would be in, on, beside, and so on. And then we've got time, so it tells me when something's happening, so it's happening either straight away, later on, it could be 5 minutes later. There's lots of different examples of when you could give me an actual time and say at 3 o'clock. And so on, it's just telling you when something's happening. And manner tells you how a person is doing something. So if someone was doing something carefully, so carefully they walked down the street, it gives you a little bit of an insight into how that person is doing something, so that it gives you an idea. So if they're walking cautiously, then you can imagine how they are acting and what they're having to do. So if an adverbial phrase is at the beginning of a sentence, it's called a fronted adverbial and it needs to be followed by a comma. So the next morning would be an adverbial phrase. Because it's at the start of my sentence, we put a comma, they set off on their journey. Again, in the distance is my adverbial phrase for place, and it's telling me it's at the beginning of the sentence, so I need a comma before I carry on. Onomatopoeia. So these are nice and simple. They are words which sound like the thing they describe. So the picture there with lots of different examples. You might use them in a poem. It's quite often where we use them in our writing. We'll use in poetry. But we could also use things like he tapped the metal, followed by the word, so ting. The car bumped into the post, crunch, or the bee buzzed. So buzzed would be my onomatopoeia there because it sounds like the thing you are describing. Repetition. So this is a technique that's used in writing to emphasize something. So he walked and walked and walked. It gives you the impression that this is a long journey and that it's tiring, and it makes you imagine what this person is doing. Or it began to rain, it grew heavier and heavier. So it gives you it emphasizes the fact that it is raining and it's getting worse and worse. So you can kind of imagine what's happening and what the mood would be in that sentence that you're writing. Similes. Similes are used to compare two things by saying they're similar. So you would use as or like to make a simile. So she was as busy as a bee, or he was as cunning as a fox. But using like, you've got he slept like a log, or she ate like a bird. So it's comparing something to something else. It's quite often we do use animals to compare things to, like as fast as a cheetah is one of the favourite ones, and so on. Thank you for watching. I hope you found this video useful and that it will help with supporting your child with home learning this year. If there is anything else which you need help with or are unsure of, you can always contact your child's teacher on Tapestry, and we'll do our best to support you. Thank you again for your time. Please take a few minutes to complete our feedback form. The link is down below in the description, so please just click on that and complete that for us. That'd be great. Thank you very much.